All right. So I will give it over to the panelists. The first one on my screen is Jess. So I don't know if are you comfortable introducing yourself first? Just who you are, where you are, and what your job is?
Yeah, I can definitely start. I think I'm the first one on the top too, but that might just be how Zoom works. So, hi everyone. I am Dr. Jessica Aviles. I am an assistant professor at Clemson University. I can go into my background a little bit later, but I started research really early on and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I started with cancer cells and then worked with insects and realized both of those were not a good fit for me. And I found a home in biomechanics, and now I specialize with rehabilitation and gait biomechanics.
All right. Divya, you're next on my screen.
All right, Anna. Hello, everybody. My name is Divya. I'm also at Clemson right now. I'm a professor with a joint appointment in industrial engineering and bioengineering at Clemson. I graduated with a PhD from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor in 2010. So I've been doing this for some time. I'll spare the story of how I got into biomechanics a little bit later as we talk details, but nice to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And then Lindsay, I have you next.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm actually working as a clinical research coordinator, and I actually specialize now in phase 1 oncology trials. So I've actually made the transition out of biomechanics. So it's been a little bit of an interesting career path for me, but I graduated from UNO's Masters of Biomechanics program in 2021. So it's been more recent for me.
Great, thank you. And Shrinath, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm Srinivas. I'm currently a postdoc at NIH. I work at the clinical center, so that's the NIH's hospital. And I did my PhD from George Mason and I graduated last year. So sort of finishing up my first year. Yeah, and we can go into details about like what we all do, I guess, later.
Perfect. And then last I have Sarah.
Great. Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So I did my PhD in bioengineering at the University of Pittsburgh, graduated in 2021. And then since then, I'm at the University of Geneva in Switzerland and during my PhD, I did a lot with footwear and how can we help people to not slip with footwear. And now I'm kind of continuing the footwear trend and working with people with diabetes to develop intelligent footwear. And then hopefully going into industry soon.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was a good little intro. We're lucky to have a lot of people, so hopefully all students at this panel, you're kind of able to keep track, and we'll have everyone go into a little more detail with our first question, which is if each panelist could describe their career path and what led them to their current position and how they found that position. I'll let you all just kind of popcorn and unmute as you see fit to give your answers.
I don't mind going first again. So I alluded a little bit to my career path. I started research pretty early on my freshman year, and I didn't know what research was at all. And I started in a cancer cell biology lab. I did that, but got frustrated a little bit with not being able to see results hands-on. I moved to working with a different lab that specializes in biomechanics, but not human biomechanics, where I learned a little bit more of, okay, I'm starting to understand the world of biomechanics. This seems to be something I really like, but I would really like to work with humans. And then I transitioned to working on my master's and PhD with slips, trips, and falls and working with amputees. And when I started my master's, I didn't know if I wanted to do a PhD. I know I liked research. I know I wanted to get involved with human biomechanics. And I kind of had a rule with myself of, I can do anything for a year, or I can do anything for 2 years, and let's just see how it goes. So by the end of my master's, I was like, okay, I think I still like research. Let's try PhD. Let's see how that goes. Again, if I like it, then I wanted to keep going with it and not hold myself and wanted to keep options open. Then my PhD ended and I was like, okay, maybe I want to go into industry. I looked at different industry jobs and there wasn't really a good fit for me in what I wanted to do. I like doing projects where I can choose different specialties of working with different populations, with amputees, with athletes, with working with hospital networks, with working with startups. And I didn't find a good fit when I was looking for jobs. And then I decided to do my postdoc actually with Divya, and she convinced me to do a postdoc, and we ended up working together. And there's like, okay, I'm going to try this for a year. Let's see how it goes. And I ended up really liking it to the point that I started being open to the possibility of professor positions and assistant professor positions, and ended up obtaining a position at Clemson. And I really like the flexibility I have in my day-to-day schedule, where I'm able to work on different projects. I can choose who I collaborate with, and it really fits kind of my natural tendency to work with different projects and different people. And maybe I answered all those questions. But yeah, so that's kind of how it ended up. And I still have the rule with myself where, hey, let's see how long I like it. I'm like, if I still really like being in academia, I'll stay in academia. But I think in this current position, I get to work with hospital networks and I get to work with startups. And that really fills certain needs that I have for a career.
I can go next if you. So I did my undergrad education back home in India in electrical engineering, so nothing to do with biomechanics. I was studying power engineering and mechatronics and that sort of stuff. Then I came to the US in 2015, got my master's in California at UC Santa Barbara. So that's where I kind of started to work somewhat alike to this field, because I did sort of that. All of my master's was in haptics engineering, so I started to sort of come towards a little bit more of this human machine interface kind of systems. And then I really wanted to go towards the prosthetics area because of personal experiences and so on. Since I was a kid, I wanted to sort of engage in that kind of research. So eventually I found a position at George Mason working on trying to develop newer control modalities for upper limb prosthetics. And that's where I did my PhD. And at the end of my PhD, I sort of realized I'm a little bit more interested, not just in sort of prosthetic control or biomechatronic device control. It's I want to go towards this a little bit more of a holistic kind of research in terms of understanding the neuromechanics and biomechanics of all kinds of neuromotor disorders, not just amputation. So that's when I started looking at postdoc opportunities, and this one at NIH came up, and yeah, one thing led to another, and eventually I decided to do the postdoc here. So I guess kind of aligned with what Jessica was saying, and I'm trying towards building a profile towards getting a academic position. So that's definitely sort of option number one. But yeah, we'll see. And the reason that is option number one is I have gone into industry between my undergrad and my master's, potentially also for a little bit between my master's and my PhD, and I really hated it. So yeah, so academic positions so far, I'm liking the trajectory. So hope it continues.
I'll go next. So I think one of the biggest things for me that got me into biomechanics was doing sports from a young age, and then having a really bad injury that put me out of the game for a while. The classic sports into biomechanics story. And I was going through rehab, and I was like, how can we make this better? Because this is taking way too long. And so I really wanted to understand, how can we understand the body better? And so I signed up for a PhD program, did not have an advisor, and then ended up just doing an interview with my advisor. He was great. And then for the time I was at the University of Pittsburgh, I worked on the projects that he had funding for, and then ended up getting an NSF grant to be able to continue to do some of the stuff that I wanted to do. So a lot with footwear. I became very picky with shopping for footwear once I learned about them. And then I got to do some of the technical stuff with the mechanical engineering side, but then also working with people. And I realized that I really loved that aspect of how do we involve the technology aspect with the user-centered design. That was another aspect that I looked into. And so I was finishing up my PhD, had the stress of, oh no, I'm about to finish. I'm really stressed and I have no job. And so I was looking up some different places. I would really recommend, if you're in that place at all, Biomech L. It's a website forum that has a lot of opportunities. That's where I found the postdoc that I have right now at the University of Geneva. And one of the aspects that I really love about this is that I'm actually getting to work with the individuals that we are looking to help in the future. So it's really a user-centered design of engineering. So we're doing user perception surveys, but also working on the technical side. And I'm sort of operating as a project manager for that. But I am not interested in academia. Found that that's just not for me. And so I'm in the process right now of possibly, there's something in the works, of possibly moving into an industry position with a sports company. So that is the dream for me.
All right, I guess I can go next. So, like I said, I graduated from University of Nebraska Omaha's master's program in biomechanics in 2020. And from there, I knew that I didn't want to do a PhD because I had no idea what I wanted to use it for. So I said, you know what, I have a master's, that's good enough. Let's just go out, find a job. So I actually ended up working as a research coordinator for the Department of Biomechanics for about 2 years. And I worked on a variety of different projects ranging from sports biomechanics to working with stroke survivors to working with kids with cerebral palsy. And the main thing that I noticed between all of them was I just really liked working with people and I really liked helping patients. And so funding for my position was being cut. And so from there, I figured, you know what, I've been a research coordinator for the last 2 years, and it's actually a super available job. There are research coordinator positions everywhere for every different type of pathology or clinical population. And so I ended up actually working in the local children's hospital for 2 years. I did spina bifida and osteogenesis imperfecta research for a while, and that introduced me into the clinical trial world and working with industry sponsors. And then from there, I've actually transitioned into working in a private oncology practice now. So my last 2 positions were working more on the academic side of things, and it can get a little bit frustrating when you're starting up clinical trials of trying to get everything moving with the red tape that academic institutions have. So being able to transition to private practice has helped things move faster. So when we do need to open a trial or help stuff out with a patient, then we can get them access to that trial faster. So it's a little bit of more immediate rewards, and it's something that I've been really enjoying so far.
All right, that leaves me. So I graduated 14 years ago with a PhD in biomedical engineering, and I thought I would have answered all my questions by the time I graduated, and I'd answered nothing. I knew how to do research, but I didn't know what I wanted to do next. I didn't know why or if I wanted to do research. But I was only 25 and I wanted to travel the world. So I applied for a Marie Curie fellowship and went over to Sweden. I spent 5 years in Sweden, first as a postdoc and then as a senior researcher. I also transitioned slightly out of engineering. That was the other shift. So when I graduated, I have been working on applying biomechanics to studying work-related musculoskeletal disorders, specifically back and neck shoulder. And so when I went to Sweden, I went to a department of occupational and public health, and it was just interesting because so much more was happening there in the field rather than us doing lab-based, what is a lab-based intervention? Nothing really other than just doing small studies. So that was very hands-on, very different. I spent 5 years in Sweden. I thought I'd live, so when I went there, I thought I'd not survive more than a year there. And then after 4 years, I thought I'd live the rest of my life there, but both those predictions were false. I moved back to the US. I came to Virginia Tech and worked there for 5 years as first assistant and then associate professor. And in 21, I moved to Clemson. I've never had an industry position in my life other than a 3-month internship at Boston Scientific once. Why have I been in academia? I guess I like it. I think framing or coming up with a problem that's interesting enough that you would feel like applying yourself to, figuring out how to scope it so that it would actually interest somebody to fund it, right? And then getting to work on the problem, seeing what you find, and conveying that to the world in a way that moves the world along, even if it's like by a small nanometer, is all interesting. And then you get to do that over and over again, and not just in some disconnected way, but you can start seeing things coming together and making contributions to, concrete pieces or fields of biomechanics. And that's just so fascinating to me, and I feel like there's never a day I get bored of my work because there's so many different facets to being a faculty member. Sometimes you're pitching your ideas to others, sometimes you're trying to convince your own team that this is worth pursuing, sometimes you're reading and writing, sometimes you're teaching. It's like I couldn't imagine a more agile job, and that's why I love what I do. But maybe I've talked for too long. Anna, back over to you.
No, you talked perfectly. All right, thank you, everyone. It's really cool to see like where everyone's coming from, and hopefully you all got a good idea of some of the expertise of each of our panelists. So as I mentioned before, if you have any questions throughout this, please put them in the chat or feel free to unmute. I will continue to kind of read a list of questions that we have. Let's see. Let's discuss, I feel like this is a fan favorite. How do you manage work-life balance in your career? And we'll do popcorn style again. That seemed to work all right.
I can start on this one. So at the very start of my PhD, I was really focused on results, and I did several like 70, 80-hour weeks and realized that that is not good for anyone. And so after that, I had a lot more focus on work-life balance. And so okay, I'm going to say what worked for me. This isn't a prescription, but this is just how my brain works, and it worked. So I started just tracking my hours, and I talked with my advisor and just said, okay, if a work week is 40 hours a week, then I'm like, we worked it out that it was great. Let's do 40 hours a week. And started tracking my hours and just made sure that when I was there, I was really there. And then when I was home, wasn't thinking about work. Or when I was away from my office, sorry for the background noise. When I was away from the office or from my home office, I had to force myself how to just switch off my brain. I turned off notifications for my email on my phone. Even when people would send me emails on the weekend, I just had a hard rule of no, I don't work on the weekends. And that has worked for me really well. And I've carried over some of those things into my position now. My boss sends me emails on the weekend, and he just knows that I'm just not going to respond. And generally, I try not to respond in the evening as well. But I think it's whatever works for you. So yeah, figuring out what works and then just sticking to it, because if you don't keep boundaries, then no one else is going to keep them for you. So I think just knowing ahead of time what you're going to do your best to do, and of course there are exceptions, but that's been what has worked for me. Yeah.
I can add just a little bit more to that. So I think it's kind of related to another question, Anna, that you had sent out about like how did you find your mentorship, things like that. because I think those two things are tied together. So one good thing looking back now, I didn't know this when I was making those choices. Now looking back, I know that I made the right choice because my mentors have a certain way of working, and that really suits me as a person because and thank God I made those choices. So the way they work is they ask me when I am going to deliver something, right? Like a piece of code or some paper draft or whatever it is. And they say, okay, well, can you do this in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever? And if I say no, it's going to take me a month, they're like, okay, fine. So give us the date, and whatever that date is, till then, I do not get asked anything, even if I don't show up to lab for 6 days or if I'm here till 8 p.m. every day. It's they completely give their hands off, and then it's my job to deliver on the day, and that's just how it is, and that's worked well for me so far. So the good thing about what I do right now is the only time I have to be in the lab is when there's a data collection in the hospital. Otherwise, nobody's asking me when I'm here. Like, so I can, like I'm going to leave after this call, and that's fine because I'm just going to keep on working on the paper. Nobody expects me to like check in, check out, whatever, because they know that I'll deliver what I asked, what they asked me to tomorrow. So uh, luckily, my mentors have also that working style, so it's fine. And I like doing like I don't mind working on the weekend or whatever. So uh, yeah, as long as I get what I need to get done. So
My work-life balance has changed quite a bit, and that's okay. I don't think there's a solution that will work for any period in your current job or future jobs, and it's okay to keep switching what works and fine-tuning. So during my PhD, I think it really helped that I had an advisor who had better boundaries that maybe I knew how to set for myself on work hours, where I knew not to expect emails from them after 5 p.m. or over the weekend. So that really helped me know, okay, I'm not expected to work all the time because I can't get a response from my direct advisor. So that helped me during my PhD really treat it like a job where I would go in, and when I go in for my PhD, I'm dedicated and focused on the work, but then I can leave and have a life after that and have that balance. Then when I switched into my different positions after my PhD, I think it was harder for me to understand what work-life balance meant because it was ultimately up to me what I wanted that to look like. So different things that have helped me has been setting boundaries of saying, I'm not going to work on the weekends at all or on this day on the weekend. And that changes semester by semester, just depending how busy I am and different like commitments that I have. I also schedule in time when I'm going to go out and go for a walk on a weekly basis for structured time to go out of the office, have that time. And if it's in my schedule, I tend to follow it a lot more than just say, yeah, I'll do it on Thursday. And then I never end up doing it on Thursday. So it needs to be in my schedule with the same priority as all my other work stuff going on. And I can see it all at once, and then I can move things around. There's other things with how I communicate my commitment levels with people who I work with in the lab or different collaborators of saying, I'm not available this week. How about this week? And moving and shifting things around. So I'm clear about expectations. And I think that helps me manage my time of saying, I'm at my max for this week or this month. How about let's touch base this other time? So it frees up my time. So I'm not feeling like I always have to respond. I also made it so my phone can't tell me when I get emails past 8 or 9 p.m., which has been amazing because then if I don't get the notification, I can't check my emails or stress about things. So that's what's helped me.
I'm going to give you a slightly different perspective from what you've heard, and take it with a pinch of salt because my work-life balance is always a work in progress. But I'm not a very organized person by nature, so schedules don't work for me. If I say I will work from time A to time B, I do that 3 days in a row. The fourth day, my mind just rebels. I'm that kind of a person. So I'm saying this to tell you that work-life balance is what you make out of it, right? Like there are phases in life when work becomes life. If you're going to graduate next month, probably you're throwing work-life balance out of the window. And there are phases when things calm down and you catch up and do things. So I don't if I perceive work-life balance as a thing I have to check every day, like, as a balance every day, I wouldn't achieve it, and I'd be more stressed about not achieving it than, trying to go that way. But incidentally, I also have to have work-life balance because I am the mother to 2 children, and they're both young, and I have numerous, childcare responsibilities. So in some sense, that some amount of balance is forced on me. But my point with this is like what Srinivas was saying. If you have goals, and if you know how to get to those goals, and you can phase out your work, balance is what you make out of the rest of your time, right? There's nobody, I think, in today's world, except if you're in a wet lab, that asks you to or expects you on a day-by-day basis to be in a certain place at a certain time, especially in academia. So that can be either extremely liberating or totally frustrating. It could, like, because COVID came and things changed a lot for us. I used to be the kind of person that could go into work, leave my computer at work, and then, things at home were different. And with COVID and work from home, there's no such sanctuary now. My work follows me everywhere. And so if you don't bring up that discipline and, focus on what you need to get done, it's impossible to achieve any kind of balance. But my sort of longer term take on this is nothing waits for you, right? Like, life doesn't just hang around and wait for you to find your balance and come to it. It keeps moving. So move with it. Don't feel like something is too risky or something is too crazy to take steps. I meet students sometimes that say, can I go and do this because I also have to do XYZ? And my answer always is like, it is your life and you have this one life to live. So fill it with the things you like to do. And if it's not working out, you will know, right? I mean, if you are getting stressed, if you're not enjoying the things you should be enjoying, then that's your signal to take a pause and figure out what's not going well. There's no formula to work-life balance is what I want to say.
So I'm actually very, very strict with my work-life balance. So I go in and I work 8 to 4 every day. And if I don't get it done by 4 o'clock, it will be there when I come back the next day. Or if it's on a weekend, it'll be there when I come back on Monday, and I'll check my emails when I get in. Something else that really helps is I happen to actually work for a company that discourages us from having our work emails on our phones. So I can't check anything, which is very nice. And something that has also helped me is, getting used to not doing a data collection in the evening or coming in on weekends to, finish writing your thesis or whatever. Is knowing, like, my company has normal business hours and no one is expected to check their stuff outside of regular business hours. So the fact that, working in industry, it's very nice to be like, okay, everyone's on this schedule, like everyone is expected to be here at this time. Like, if the doctors or nurses that I work with aren't here, like, I can't do my job. So I go home, and it's pretty amazing. And something else that I like to do is, especially when I was a new grad, is I would like to schedule social activities that forced me to get out of the office for, like, right after work hours. So if I was planning on getting out at 5 o'clock, I would schedule to, like, go take my dogs to the dog park at like 5:30 or something like that. Or I would schedule to go see a movie at like 6 o'clock to make sure I can get my butt home. And so I've found something that works for me. I'm the kind of person that, like, if I don't have to think about work, I don't really want to. And that's just kind of how my perspective has been since I've graduated. But I think for others, it might not necessarily work out to be quite as strict.
Thank you, everyone. Those were great answers. We do have a question in the chat. Yeah, all right. So for speakers who have had their career shift from one area of work or type of research to another after they finish their education, what challenges have you encountered making this shift? And I'll also just note that if you don't all have to answer every question, like if you feel like you have nothing else to add, don't feel like you have to say anything additional.
So I think I might be the one who's done the biggest change here of going from initially my thesis and background was in sports biomechanics, and now I do phase 1 clinical trials for cancer patients. And it's been a relatively rapid transition of the last 3 years of going from, academic investigator-initiated studies in a biomechanics department to now I work with pharmaceutical companies like AstraZeneca. I work with Pfizer and all of these smaller pharmaceutical companies too. And this is going to kind of touch on one of the questions that Anna sent us before, but mentorship has been absolutely huge for me. And so the main reason I've been able to make this shift is because of connections I've made, at least in the community. So Omaha is lucky to be a pretty big STEM and research hub. And so at my different positions, I've been able to connect with others who have been in slightly adjacent positions to mine, and watching how they have transitioned has been really big for me in order to kind of get myself out of a biomechanics pigeonhole into being more in clinical research as a whole. And so making those connections, seeing how people have successfully transitioned, and then remembering that during your education, you're getting a lot of really great transferable skills. So you're learning about human subjects research, you're learning about how to work with IRBs and how to work with patients and also communicate with medical doctors oftentimes. And those are really important skills for if you're ever interested in making the transition into industry and clinical research as a whole, I think.
Thank you, Lindsay. Does anyone else feel like they have any thoughts on if they made a transition? All right. And thank you for that question as well. Looks like we have another question in the chat. So this person is considering going into industry or getting a master's degree after graduation. In your experience, is getting a master's degree useful or advantageous? This person's not sure what industry position they're looking for yet. Do you want to clarify if are you finishing your bachelor's degree and then considering a master's, or do you have another degree? Undergrad. Okay, great. So this person's kind of wondering what they should do next after undergrad, it sounds like, in terms of if they should pursue a master's degree if they're looking to go into industry.
I think I can take this one again. So I work as a clinical research coordinator, or a CRC. And so the basic educational requirements for that are typically a bachelor's. Oftentimes you'll see people coming in with a strong nursing background, and that just kind of helps out with their clinical care aspects and being able to work with patients more. You really don't need a master's degree if you're planning on going into industry, but it also depends on if you're planning on working at either a site level, meaning that you're seeing patients on a regular basis and you're working face-to-face with the doctors, or if you're wanting to work more on the sponsor level, so working underneath a company like Philips or Pfizer or AstraZeneca or one of those. You don't necessarily need a graduate degree. Sometimes it can help, especially if you're interested in looking at getting more hands-on experience with working with patients or developing those skills. So I've found that at least for my master's, I got a lot more experience of learning how to work with IRBs or how to specifically work with specific patient populations, and that's been really helpful. But it's not necessary for industry, but sometimes it can help.
I absolutely agree with Lindsay. I think if you wanted to specifically go into R&D, then I think a master's would play a difference there. But whether you're going into a clinical position or different kinds of biomechanics, you could go anywhere you wanted to go with a bachelor's, right? So what would a master's offer you? In some cases, it might be the right fit because it might open up some higher level positions for you. In some cases, you might just get paid a little bit better if you had a master's degree, but there isn't like a universal, these are the fields where a master's degree is advised before you go out into the industry. That's not true in biomedical engineering in general yet, and to my best knowledge, not in biomechanics at all.
I would suggest to start looking at what jobs might be available, whether you're eligible to apply or not, but just to see what's out there. Look on LinkedIn, look on Biomechanics, Google search biomechanics jobs in the area if you want to go into sports or rehab, and see what the current applications look like. See what they say, if they say master's or bachelor's, or if some say PhD. And then I would also suggest reach out to people on LinkedIn. I've done that before, not for a job, but just say, hey, I'm really interested in your company. Do you have 15 minutes for a quick call so I can ask you some questions? I'm interested in going this field. That actually ended up landing me in a job interview. So maybe that happens, maybe that not, but don't go in expecting that. It really should just be phrased of, I just want to know what your field looks like, and maybe they'll answer, maybe not, but you can start making those connections and say, okay, from people in industry, what is that perspective specific to what you might be interested in?
I would also add one small thing. It's rather than looking at degrees as something like gateways to get you something, I would share something that my advisor told me, because I asked basically the same question in the third year of my PhD, but they told me instead of looking at your sort of degree and CV, why don't you think of yourself as a bunch of skill sets? So what do you know how to do is probably more important than what some provost at a university has signed off about you. So because unfortunately, a lot of people with degrees don't have the skill set that should ideally come with that degree. So if somebody markets a job as saying, oh, this job requires a master's degree or a PhD or whatever it is, that's just shorthand for saying, oh, we want this person to be able to do X. So if you can show that you can do that X without having that degree, then so be it. But yeah, try to think of like marketable skills.
Srinivas, that's actually a great transition to our next question. I don't know if you guys are like in on this together, but Abed asks, what skills would you recommend developing during graduate studies, including both biomechanics, so like technical skills, and I guess more soft skills and social abilities like leadership or networking?
I can start on this one, if that's okay. So sorry, kids are getting in the bath, so they're a little loud. One thing I would highly recommend is get to know yourself, get to know your learning style, get to know, I feel like in my PhD, I learned how to learn, and it's a very, very useful skill that is going to be transferable no matter where you go, because even if you don't know an answer, if you know how to get the answer, like that's the way. So learn how to learn. And then from the social skills, if you're an engineer, generally we don't love socializing, but there are some extroverted engineers. But I would say really push yourself for the networking aspect. People say it's all about who you know. And I was in denial for a long time, but I'm realizing more and more, yes, it is about connections. It's about just getting to know people. And so if you can, for conferences, go to conferences. If you need to, find a buddy and just try to talk to people, get to know, ask good questions. Yeah, and see where it can lead. And go in, I would encourage you to go in with the spirit of, this isn't about me getting a job, kind of like you were saying before, but this is about me. How can I learn to better myself so that my future me will be grateful for the skills that I've attained during this time when it's really just focused on learning.
And I think the greatest thing graduate school gives you is your network of peers. 10 years, 15 years from now, your peers will be the people that you would be sending your mentees to find jobs, whether it's in industry or academia. It's a lot of fun doing things together when you have a good network of peers in school, and it's also great after school to stay in touch with them. So I know it's not graduate studies, but graduate school as such, don't forget to hang out with your peers, technically or not.
I would say another additional thing specifically about graduate studies is it is difficult, but still, it's difficult to do this, but you should learn to sort of become okay with being a little bit uncomfortable intellectually or mentally in a certain environment. I learned it the hard way, but I think I like it. I am better now for having survived it. So because the definition of going to grad school is you're going to go deeper and deeper into your topic, which means you're going to the probability of you hanging out with people who are smarter than you is going to go up and up and up, which means some of those people who are as smart or smarter than you are probably also not going to be very nice with their social skills, which means they're going to be rude when they don't need to. And sometimes it is good training to be able to take that, especially at conferences, at whatever, because there will invariably there will be somebody above you in the totem pole, whether you're in academia or industry, who will be not a nice person. Being able to sort of navigate that is, I think, a useful skill in the long term, no matter where you go.
I think these are all really great points. The things I would like to add are figure out how to give incredible presentations. That can go such a long way of getting your science communicated well, getting the job you're looking for, learning how you communicate with different audiences. Maybe they're not all going to be engineers, researchers. Some people are going to be people in the community who have a certain disease or condition. And so being able to communicate across different populations is such an important skill. I think with whatever you do, if you stay in research or not, that's something you can transfer. I would also suggest get practice mentoring. See if you can work with other undergraduate students or undergraduate students or new graduate students. That's a really hard skill to have that no one really teaches you how to do. And then one day you're kind of thrown into this position where you're mentoring a bunch of people and you have to figure out how to do that. And I think with that, taking criticism, but also giving feedback, positive and negative, and having that really strong mentorship style. I think those are skills you can start learning now, and whatever career path you decide to go in, it can really help you out.
If I can add one more thing on there, to go off of what you were saying, Jessica, practice talking to people who are not scientists. I did an exercise that I am so grateful for, and it was talking about how do we explain our research to someone who has no idea, because if you work with businesses someday, you need to be able to figure that out. So they did this exercise, and I would encourage you even now, explain what you're doing in the most complicated way you can, and then also explain it in 7 words as if you're talking to your grandma. And it's such a good exercise to just simplify everything that you're doing. And so just talk to people outside of science, and it'll help you with the communication side as well.
Yeah, just gonna definitely agree with Sarah there. I happen to have to explain research to a lot of people's grandmas. So that just kind of comes with depending on what sort of populations you work with. And then also I happen to work with a lot of medical providers that aren't necessarily in the research space, but they are helping collaborate on the research project, whether or not they officially signed up to do research. They're just trying to do their jobs. And so making sure that you can communicate and work in a team of both people who are directly involved in research, and then also just being able to work with clinicians and understand that a lot of times for clinicians, they don't want to deal with research. So research is often an added bonus when you're working in a clinical space. And, the providers there are trying to do their jobs. And so making sure that you can work with them and understand their priorities versus your priorities.
That's funny that you all mentioned that because I did a research study at retirement communities, and I honestly think that made a huge difference in my presentation skills because I had to present my research over and over to people in retirement communities. So I'm pitching ASB does like a retirement community presentation panel, or some universities already have that where you can sign up and go and be part of getting a part of presentations out in the community. So if you see any of that in your institution, wherever you are, then maybe sign up, try it. I failed very badly or pretty hard the first few times I did it, but the more I did it, it just became natural and really easy. And a lot of the skills I'm still using today.
Thank you, everyone. Those were really good thoughts. I love the idea of a ASB at a retirement community. I will pass it along. All right, does anyone else have any questions? Otherwise, I can go back to our list. We have about 10 minutes left, maybe time for one more question. All right, I will ask one from the list. If you have any that come up, feel free to put them in the chat. All right. And we've covered so many things, but I do like this question. What are the most challenging and rewarding aspects of your work, and how do you navigate the challenges that come up?
Sarah, do you want to go first?
Go for it. I'll go after.
Okay, I can talk for 10 minutes straight, but I'm going to not. I think it's hard to see them separate, right? I mean, you're doing things that you don't know there is an answer to. Sometimes there's no answer. Sometimes you never get to the answer over your project period. So it's what could be rewarding could turn into a challenge. So it's hard to sort of separate the two. So I'm just going to talk about them together. I think investing in your time and energy in people and getting it back through what they learn and how they move forward in life is obviously one of the greatest things you get in academia, and the unique things you get in academia that you don't get anywhere else. So I think this is true of not just me, but the people that I've come across in life, including my mentors. The most rewarding thing about being a faculty member is to mentor students, mentor colleagues, juniors, your peers, whoever it is, to see people grow, to when you see a spark of understanding in somebody else based on what you just communicated or an idea that you shared. I think as humans, that's sort of why we do what we do. And that just transcends, life and work also. So that's singularly the most rewarding thing I feel that I do every day. But it is very challenging, even just that aspect, because no two people are the same. So it doesn't matter how deep and technical your ideas are. If you cannot get them across to somebody correctly, you're not doing something right? It's not just about having the idea. If it is got to have an impact in the real world, you should first be able to communicate it and to be able to work on it. So that can become challenging also, especially if you walk into a classroom and you're trying to teach, or if you're mentoring students, advisees. Every student learns differently or understands differently. So figuring out where your wavelength matches and how to get things across, because it's a long relationship. If anybody here in this room is thinking about going into academia and having your own PhD student, you and the student are probably stuck with each other, right? Like for 4 or 5 years. So if you cannot find a way to communicate effectively on a regular basis, that same relationship that could be one of the most rewarding things of both your lives could turn into a disaster. So just, it cannot be overstated how important that is. I think in this day and time, there's so much funding in science and technology, STEM in general. It's a good time to actually be in academia. There is a lot of emphasis on health-related stuff, both at NIH and NSF. But having said that, it's always challenging to find and match the availability of funding to the ideas you want to actually pursue. So you can't sell your soul, right? You can't just do where money is. But at the same time, if you can't even move a little bit from the original idea you conceived, then something is not working out. Why is nobody funding your idea? So there's a lot of things you need to be doing to be very flexible, not very too flexible. So that kind of a golden mean, I think, is the tricky part about this business. I said I will not talk for 10 minutes, so I'll stop soon. I just see a quick question on the chat about pursuing a postdoc, especially for those interested in research leadership positions. I want to comment on that and then I'll stop. I think a postdoc can be very, very good for you, because if you are not ready to get committed into an academic position, if you're not ready to start the rat race of being a tenure track faculty member right out of the bat, right on the day you graduate, a postdoc almost is like protected research time. You have time to take risks. You have time to pursue some ideas which are slightly different from the singular topic you may have focused on in your PhD, to figure out what sorts of directions your research could take off in before you step into a faculty position. Because once you step into a faculty position, your clock starts ticking, right? You have 5 years, 4.5 years, whatever it is in your institution. So irrespective of what you hear about the pay in a postdoc position, it is some intellectually stimulating and free time. But why am I saying so much when Srinivas is here? So I'll stop with that if anybody else wants to pick up from here.
Yeah, I can speak to a postdoc from a person who doesn't want to continue in academia. I have a lot of colleagues who did postdocs and then moved on to academia positions. So, Divya, what you're saying, 100% agree. In terms of pay, I just want to put out there, if you do a postdoc in Europe, it's usually paid better than the States. So just out there. But I would say for me, if you change your mind and you want to go into industry, postdoc, it's not necessary for that, but it can be a good kind of stepping stone. The first thing people told me though when I got into a postdoc was your first job is to look for your next position, because being a postdoc is not a forever position. So when I got in, immediately started talking with my advisor of like, all right, how can we make it so that this is a win for me for the next part of my career? And with that, I'll just jump back to the other question. One of the most challenging things for me is my direct supervisor is a medical doctor, and our brains work very differently. And it's a really good practice for being able to communicate with a lot of different people. And one of the primary reasons that I want to leave academia is because of the writing. So a big part of the postdoc has been IRB stuff and writing grants and papers, which I'm not super fond of. And so I would say if you are going into a postdoc, know what your advisor expects of you in the time that you're going to be there. Really try to have an open communication and try to make it a win for both of you if you can.
I can quickly answer the question as well. In terms of what I find challenging and like is actually the same thing. So I work on a lot of very early stage rehab technologies that should one day find a place among rehab clinics around the world. The challenging part is that they are early stage, which means nobody really knows how it's going to work. But that's also rewarding because when it does work, I'm usually the first person to find out in the world. So it's extremely gratifying. The other thing is, I as a human, I'm relatively, I think I'm better at like delayed gratification. So I'm okay with thinking or knowing that whatever I'm doing today is not going to find an application in 1 year, 2 year, 5 years, maybe 20 years, and that's perfectly fine because somebody has to do that. If everybody goes behind the 1 or 2 year return on investment cycle, then we don't have MRI machines ever. So yeah, I guess it's like just a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, so I also work in early phase research. I guess the biggest difference is I'm actually having patients take whatever medication is just being put out so that we can learn about the safety profile of it. So it's a lot of hopefully the medicine works for the patient, and sometimes it doesn't and their disease progresses and we have to try and find them a new treatment. So it can be really challenging when you find out that a treatment isn't working for a patient and they need to come off of the study treatment and we need to try and reconfigure finding something else. But it can be really rewarding to essentially, as a research coordinator, help a patient navigate through the clinical trial process and kind of help be that liaison between research and the clinical providers. And it's something that it's a very unique position to be in, being able to understand both the medical clinical side of things and the research side of things.
All right, Jess, did you want to say anything or should we wrap up? I don't know if you have anything to
No,
add.
I think we can wrap up.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for all of our student attendees. This is one of our biggest events we've had. So thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully you learned some stuff and have some takeaways that you can think about. Special thanks to also our ASB Student Chapters who helped to facilitate this and who recruited our panelists, and utmost thanks to our career panelists who took time out of their, obviously you now know about their busy careers. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, telling us a little bit about your story, and yeah, giving us some insights. Thank you so much. This will be posted on our website, the ASB website, if you want to go back and rewatch anything. Thanks, everyone, and hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Anna. This was fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.